Hello, I'm Sam Martin, and today I will be talking about violence as a learned versus a biological behavior. A real problem that our society is facing today is public and school shootings. There seems to be a different shooting just about every other week where somebody brings a gun into a public area and people get hurt. So our culture today is asking for answers and has many questions about what causes violence? Where does it come from? Is it from our parents? Is it something we learn from our parents, or is it something that we pick up through genes and traits that we pass on from one another? I mean, there's many questions, and for the criminal justice field today, for me personally, this is a topic that really hits home. Not only was I a criminal justice major in my undergrad, but I also had a psychology major as well. So the article that I actually chose for um, my presentation and my paper for this semester was Human Ecology, Crime, and Crime Control, Linking Individual Behavior and Aggregate Crime by Joanne Savage and Brian Villa. And to sum up this article, so what researchers did is they looked in three separate areas to try and explain human behavior, whether it's a biological trait or whether or not it's evolutionary, or if it's something to do with our cultures, or even somehow it is formed within us through the societies we live in, the environments we live in, either those being harsh or easier. The first one was they looked at behavior in all different kinds of species. So they set up an environment or they set up a situation, and what they tried to do is they studied different animal species. So whether it was monkeys, fish, rats, humans, you name it, they gave them a situation, they put them in an adverse situation, and what they did is they studied and saw how each population reacted to that situation. So, from studying behaviors from species to species, this gave researchers an idea of what traits we as humans used through evolution, which ones are something that maybe we learned, and which are some that are it's just inherited. It's a reaction. We don't think about it. We just do. It's not anything we can control. The next study that researchers conducted was they studied behaviors of humans, but in different cultures. So they wanted to see how each culture would treat a different behavior and see how that then affected future generations and even current generations, and how they reacted, how they saw different crimes. So they would take the beliefs of the culture, they would then focus on them, and then they would see how likely those beliefs would then influence the crime rates or influence the likelihood that someone from within that culture would then commit a crime. So the findings that this research actually found were, to be honest with you, not really that surprising. It didn't really give a definitive answer, but to go back to look at the each individual species and how they reacted, that they called that the ecological paradigm, and it showed that we as humans, we obviously react differently than most other species. There's the flight and fight or fight reflex and that kind of stuff. So it was things like these that showed humans use violence not only to protect ourselves and to gain food or status and that kind of stuff like many other species, but humans also use violence as a way to release emotions. It also went on to say that the social ecology or the environment does play a factor in people in becoming more likely to commit crime or not to commit crime. And this goes back to the Chicago School of Criminology. We know that from studies done in the 1920s and later released in the 1940s that people that live in an area that are lower social economic status are more likely to commit crime. And as the study showed in the Chicago study, that the farther away they got from the low social economic status, the less likely people were to commit crime, or at least the crime rate was lower. It essentially summed up the study and summed up everything that it had been talking about to say there's no real answer to this question, that it's a little bit of everything. It's a little bit of the biological traits that we gain from our parents. It's a little bit of where we grow up and the people that we're around, and it's a little bit of, a learned behavior, how our parents raise us, the people we grow up around, what people teach us is right from wrong, and that kind of stuff. So it wasn't really one definitive answer. There was really three big criticisms to this research and to this paper. The first being is the paper tries to explain crime by looking just at individual behavior. Now, when you're trying to explain something as large and as out there, open-ended as crime, you can't explain it by just looking at one person. Each person has a different reason for their actions. So some people might commit crime out of fury. Some people might commit crime out of passion. Some people might commit crime just because they felt like it that day and they were bored. So it's really, really hard to say, hey, 4 to 5 people all said we committed the crime because of this, and try and say, well, the majority there did it because of this example. Now, there are just way too many factors to why people committed crime. As we go back to the last slide, it's a little bit of everything. So to try and say, we're going to study one person at a time, and we're going to study their case and what they did and why they kept doing it, it's not really the best way to be looking at crime as a whole or human behavior as a whole for violence. Another really interesting, I thought at least, criticism of this paper is this paper was comparing humans to other species, and that just doesn't make any sense, because as humans, we are very, very unique. Yes, we have similarities with apes and primates and that kind of stuff, but even they have somewhat predictable responses to things and how they run. Each human being is a different human being, and they all have different reasons. Sometimes they react because of a mental disorder. Sometimes it's because of how they were grown up. Sometimes it's what they're dealing with that day. But human beings as a whole are just so much more different than any other species on planet Earth, because we reason, we feel emotions, we feel frustrated, we feel happy, we feel elated. So other species don't really have that complex of emotions or the dynamics that human beings live with every single day of their life. So to try and compare us to other species or to study the two together doesn't make a whole lot of sense. The last criticism of this paper has to do with timing and asking the question, are what we're learning about a culture or society really valid? So as we know, the FBI's UCR when it comes out with data from 2 years prior, because it takes that long to collect all the crime stats from all over the nation. And what the argument was against this paper was, it's taking 2-3 years to collect our data for our paper. And when we're looking at cultures are so fluid. They're so adaptive and they change so much. To study a culture and the effects of cultures have on crime due to what the paper referred to as a lag effect isn't really the most valid way to be comparing crime. Moving on, I wanted to take a look at a theory that when I was an undergrad, I really, really bought into, and for the explanation of not only violence, but crime as a whole. This would be the theory of differential association by Edwin Sutherland. And what this theory speaks on, what it believes in, what it builds its base off of, is the fact, to simplify it, is that crime is a learned behavior. That as a child gets older, they learn more criminal behavior. And they learn not only, how to commit crimes, how to get away with crimes, what crimes are worth committing and what crimes aren't worth committing, but they learn that crime is okay. This was right around the same time as the Chicago School of Criminology, so these kind of went hand in hand with one another. It showed that, if somebody grows up in a certain area, that they're going to be surrounded by lower class people, and then those lower class people are more likely to commit crime. Those people then are going to be teaching their friends, their family, their children the different morals and ethics, and they're going to teach them how to commit crime. And differential association is without flaw, or is with flaw. One of the biggest critique of this theory is it's impossible to measure the intensity in which someone learns from another person. That it's impossible to measure the effect one person has on another person. Is a crime learned, or is the techniques of crime learned from person A or person B? It's impossible to compare, and it's impossible to say, well, it was this person or it was this person. So there's a real hole here, and there's no measurable aspect of this. And when we're talking about academia and creating laws and proving theories right and wrong, this is a huge flaw. It's impossible to prove or disprove, so therefore that's why it remains a theory. Now, one really cool experience I had in my undergrad was I was given the opportunity to come up with a research project, come up with something to base off of the differential association theory. And being, again, with schools and violence and that kind of stuff, I wanted to see if children become more violent as they get older. Is it something that as we become older, we're more likely to become violent in different situations? Basing this off differential association, my hypothesis was as we get older, we learn more crime, we're around more people, we're more likely to be around other criminals, we have more time to learn and pick up different aspects of crime and pick up and have lesser morals. So I believed that in a school, the younger children would be the less likely to be violent, and the older children in the school would be more likely to be violent. After being chosen for my research to be studied, I went to Janesville, Wisconsin, where I'm from, and I observed children at an elementary school while they're at recess. My mother is a second grade teacher at this school, and I got permission from the principal to do so. And I just sat from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. for about 3 days, and I observed any violent act that I saw any of the children made, and then wrote it down and kept it under each age group, K through 5. I defined violent as any act that was physical or that was associated with a physical event. So the obvious things were kicking, punching, and pushing. And then the less obvious, the more ambiguous acts that I deemed as violent were a child raising a hand, or a child chasing after another child, or a child getting ready to kick someone before a teacher stopped them, those kind of things. And again, my hypothesis was being that as the children grew older, as they had more time around their peers, as they met more people in their lives, they were more likely to handle situations aggressively or with violence. So again, not a strong correlation, but there was just enough, just a little bit of data that showed that there was some kids might pick up more aggressive behaviors as they grow older and they're around their peers. Again, no test is without questions, no test is without criticisms, and there was definitely some validity problems in my test that I even identified as myself, not just my superiors when I brought my data to them. One was the population size. I saw in total, I would want to say about 300 kids in 3 days. So that not only is 3 days a short amount of period of time to be able to say this test is valid, but at the same time, it's the same kids. It's in the same area. I didn't go to an affluent area. I went to an underprivileged area. I didn't see kids just of one race. I saw kids of many, many races. So there was some problems in the validity of my test. In conclusion, I just want to start out with thank you for taking the time to watching my presentation today. You'll see my references above, the answer to violence in our communities, and it's very, very scary because as it's been shown over the last several years, it can happen anywhere. It can happen at the movie theater, at the mall, at the concert, at school. And right now, we really, really don't have an answer to why this is happening, why people are doing this, why people are more violent. Um, and what we learned from this presentation, what I've learned from this presentation, or at least took away from it, is, it's still, there's no right or wrong answers. There's several different reasons. Each person's reason for their aggression or their violence is going to be different than the next person's. And with that being the answer, we need to stop trying to fix the offenders, and we need to start thinking about stopping them. We need to find ways to make our schools safer, whether that is bringing in more police officers, developing technology to stop or to prevent firearms from being set off several times, more security at the doors, finding a way for quicker escape routes, arming our kids with the knowledge of how to get out. And I'll leave you with this, and it's a very sad story. I was on social media one day and I watched this video of a woman who was sitting and learning about different techniques that they would be teaching her child and the children of the school district, the kindergartners, on how to escape a school shooting. And she said, "This is where we are, America. This is the point where we're at, where we're teaching kindergartners, 5 and 6 year olds, how to minimize casualties when they go to school and there's a shooting. Something needs to be done. We need to find a way to make our schools safer. We need to find a way to disarm shooters and violent offenders before they can take one death and turn it into 20 or 30 or 40 or 50. For me personally, I don't believe we're ever going to find that quick solution, the cure to violence. I just think it's too complex, and the human brain, human behavior, human evolution is too complex for finding one answer to that question. Again, thank you for your time, and I hope you enjoyed.